"I'll take everything from you," my husband declared in court. Yet the divorce destroyed him completely. Marcus showed up the night before the hearing dressed as if he were going to accept an award. He stood in the kitchen, smoothing the front of his suit and checking his tie in the black, unlit screen of the television. He did not look at Aaliyah at first. He spoke to his reflection, to his own idea of victory, the way he always did when he wanted the room to revolve around him. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. It ends tomorrow, he said, voice sharp with satisfaction. I hope you packed. I'm not waiting for you to drag your stuff out after court. The condo is mine. We already went over this. Aaliyah sat at the table with a mug of tea that had gone cold. She watched him the way she watched a spreadsheet when she knew a formula was wrong, but had not yet found the cell that caused the whole column to lie. She didn't blink. She didn't rise to his performance. Over the last 6 months, she had learned that his confidence was loudest when it had the least to stand on. We didn't go over anything, she said softly. You talked. I listened. That's not the same thing. He laughed. That practiced laugh that used to sound charming when she was still in love with the version of him he wanted her to see. He turned, finally giving her his attention, and the smirk on his face tried to convince the room that he could rewrite reality with enough swagger. Don't play dumb, he said. I've got a shark lawyer. You've got some old guy from a free clinic. I paid the mortgage. I earned the money. You stayed home the last 2 years pretending you were building a cozy life while I carried everything. Your contribution is 0. The word 0 hung between them like a verdict, but Aaliyah's mouth did not tighten and her eyes did not water. 0 was a number. Numbers were honest. Numbers were also dangerous when someone assumed they were harmless. Marcus paced to the counter and grabbed his keys, letting them jingle as if the sound itself proved ownership. I offered you 20 grand, he continued. You refused because you're stubborn. Now you won't even get that. He had always been a gifted liar, the kind who could tell a story with such ease that he started to believe it, too. He could sell anyone anything. That was how he rose quickly at work, how he charmed clients, how he charmed her at the beginning. The difference now was that Aaliyah was no longer listening with her heart. She was listening to her training. Crystal is waiting in the car, he said, already turning away as if Aaliyah were a piece of furniture he had outgrown. We're celebrating tomorrow. After the judge signs, we're moving in here. So clear out the walk-in closet. She wants the bigger side. He slammed the door behind him. The quiet that followed felt thick, almost physical. Aaliyah looked around the kitchen, the painted walls, the curtains she had chosen, the table where they used to talk about baby names and vacations, and the small, ordinary future she thought they were building. Marcus believed he knew her because she didn't shout and she didn't throw dishes and she didn't make scenes. He believed silence meant weakness. He forgot that silence can be a strategy. She took a slow breath and set her mug down with care. The shaking, the grief, the pleading, all of that had lived in her body weeks ago, back when the truth first cracked her life open. It had burned out, leaving something colder in its place. She was tired, yes, but not helpless. She was steady. It had started on a rainy Tuesday in November, the kind of gray day that made the city look washed out and weary. Marcus had texted her in the afternoon, saying he was buried at work, meeting with executives, running late. He promised they'd watch a movie together that night. Aaliyah believed him, because believing him was easier than admitting the pattern she felt but refused to name. She was doing something simple, taking his best suit to the cleaners. It was a habit, one of those small tasks she performed because it felt like love. Before she put the jacket into the bag, she checked the pockets, the way she always did. Marcus was the kind of man who left important things everywhere and then blamed the world when he couldn't find them. Her fingers found a folded receipt in an inside pocket. Thick paper. Expensive store. She unfolded it and saw the boutique name first, a downtown luxury jeweler, not a kiosk, not a mall shop. The timestamp made her pulse jump. 2:30 in the afternoon. Yesterday. The total made her sit down, as if her legs had decided to quit without asking permission. $5,000. The item description was a bracelet, gold with bright stones. Something inside her chest snapped, not with drama, but with a clean, silent break, like a thread pulled too tight and finally giving way. Yesterday at 2:30, Marcus had told her he was in a meeting. Yesterday at 2:30, he had purchased jewelry. Her first instinct was to call him and demand an explanation, to shout until her throat hurt, to throw the receipt at him and watch his face crumble. Then another instinct took over, one that had been trained into her long before she ever became someone's wife. Emotions made people careless. Facts made them dangerous. Aaliyah opened her laptop instead of her phone. The world was full of liars, and the modern world was also full of receipts that never truly disappeared. Marcus had mentioned a new assistant recently. A young woman, he said, organized and bright, good at coffee runs and calendars. He had said the name like it meant nothing. Crystal. It took Aaliyah minutes to find Crystal's public profile. The account was a bright parade of expensive places and confident poses, full lips and perfect angles, the kind of life curated like a storefront display. Yesterday evening, Crystal had posted a photo from inside a luxury car, a champagne glass in hand. And on her wrist, glowing under soft lighting, was the bracelet from the receipt. The caption was playful and cruel in the way people were when they believed they were safe. The geotag matched a restaurant Marcus once chose for a proposal, a place he claimed was their spot, a memory he had wrapped in romance and meaning. Now it was just another stage. Aaliyah stared at the screen until the letters blurred. She did not scream. She did not cry. She felt something drain out of her with every heartbeat, leaving behind a steady numbness that was almost relief. The question was no longer whether he had betrayed her. The question was how far, how long, and how much. When Marcus came home that night, he was loud, happy, and careless. He smelled like a night out and like other people's perfume, which he blamed on networking when she had asked in the past. He mumbled about a good deal and collapsed into bed. Aaliyah lay beside him in the dark, eyes open, listening to him breathe as if nothing in the world could touch him. In that darkness, she made a decision that felt like flipping a switch. She would not leave like a ghost, fading out of her own life. She would not be a warning story told quietly over coffee. Marcus wanted to erase her. She would make sure the books didn't balance in his favor. Over the following weeks, she wore a mask during the day. She cooked, she nodded, she listened, she played the role Marcus expected. Slightly sad, slightly tired, still trying, still soft. She asked about his day sometimes, just enough to seem normal. The performance took energy, but it bought her time. And time was what she needed. At night, when Marcus slept or when he was out with clients, she worked. She turned the small pantry off the hallway into a narrow office with a folding chair and a lamp. She gathered documents, statements, old emails, anything that could tell a story in ink and numbers. She didn't rush. She didn't guess. She traced. Marcus had changed passwords and set up two-factor codes. He thought that meant safety. He forgot about the tablet on the kitchen counter that stayed logged into the shared cloud account. He forgot that Aaliyah noticed patterns, birthdays, favorite teams, the names of his childhood friends. He forgot that trust had made her gentle, not blind. She opened a new spreadsheet and titled it the way she titled every careful piece of work. Simple, clean, and impossible to misread. Balance of justice. She built tabs the way she built cases. Real estate, transfers, household expenses, travel, gifts, cash withdrawals, unfamiliar merchants. A few nights into it, she realized Marcus's spending didn't match his official salary. The lifestyle he was funding, hotels, flights, high-end shopping, didn't fit neatly into the story he liked to tell about working hard. The numbers didn't care about pride. They only cared about totals. She pulled mortgage records first. Marcus's favorite line was that he paid for the condo and she was nobody. Aaliyah pulled older statements and felt her stomach settle into a calm, cold certainty. The down payment had been exactly $150,000. The exact amount she inherited when her grandmother died. Nana Rose, who had given her quiet love and little envelopes of cash for school supplies and birthday dinners, who had said, "Keep something for yourself, baby. The world changes fast." Marcus had convinced Aaliyah at the time to transfer the inheritance to his account, just for convenience, so he could pay the developer in one smooth transaction. She had trusted him. Trust was a gift. In the wrong hands, it became a weapon. Aaliyah found the chain, inheritance deposited into her account, transferred out to Marcus with a memo she had written out of habit, payment to the developer. Each step had a date, a time, an amount. The pattern was not messy. It was clear. It was also something Marcus assumed she would never think to trace. She breathed out slowly and saved the file. Outside, the rain tapped on the window like fingers on a desk. Somewhere in the condo, Marcus snored, a man certain the world belonged to him. Aaliyah kept working. She began with the easy trails, the ones that existed because institutions demanded them. Banks produced statements. Mortgage companies produced histories. Credit cards produced itemized lists so detailed they felt like diaries. Each line was a moment Marcus thought was private. Each line was a confession. Aaliyah printed everything twice. One set went into a plain folder marked by month, the way she organized old tax papers. The second set went into a binder with colored dividers. That binder was for court, for a judge's eyes, for the kind of scrutiny that could turn a smug grin into a trembling mouth. She bought a small label maker and used it like armor, sticking neat tags on every section. She refused to let the case look emotional. It had to look inevitable. In the early days, grief still tried to sneak in. She would find a charge for a restaurant and remember the first time Marcus took her there, back when he talked about building something real. She would see a hotel booking and remember the weekend he claimed he was too busy to visit her parents. The feelings rose like heat and then cooled, because numbers gave her no room to romanticize. Marcus had chosen. Marcus had spent. Marcus had lied. She also made a list that had nothing to do with money, but everything to do with pattern. Dates he claimed he traveled. At night he came home late. Days he snapped at her for asking simple questions. She matched those dates against payments and locations, and the timeline began to lock together like pieces of a puzzle. Every match brought not joy, but clarity. When Marcus tried to play kind sometimes, bringing home flowers, offering a sudden compliment, she watched him with the calm patience of someone watching a magician whose trick she already understood. Once, he kissed her forehead and said, "You'll be fine, Aaliyah. I'm not a monster." The line was meant to sound generous. It landed like an insult. He thought being less cruel than he could be was a favor. Aaliyah refused to confront him. Not because she was afraid, but because confrontation would have given him warning. Warning would have made him careful. Careful people covered the tracks. Careless people left evidence in their pockets. She started making calls during lunch breaks, not to friends, but to banks and offices. She asked about certified copies. She asked about notarization. She asked what a judge would accept without question. Her tone stayed calm, professional, and bored. People responded to that tone with respect. She was not begging. She was building a case. Some nights she slept in short, hard chunks, waking with columns of numbers in her mind. Yet she felt something unexpected. Strength. The betrayal had not broken her. It had stripped away softness that made her ignore warning signs. It had sharpened her, and she kept sharpening. By the second week, the binder had weight. It thudded onto the pantry desk like a small, solid promise. Marcus moved through the condo like a man already rehearsing his victory speech, leaving little insults behind him the way other people left crumbs. He changed passwords, for security. He joked that she should practice living small. He reminded her of the settlement offer as if it were charity. Aaliyah answered with nods and quiet, sounds that told him nothing. The more he bragged, the looser he became. He left his phone on the counter. He tossed mail into the same basket without sorting. He assumed she would never look. That assumption was her advantage. She wasn't searching for one dramatic smoking gun. She was collecting 1,000 boring proofs, the kind that pile up until they crush any story a liar tries to tell. She saved every file with timestamps and backups, the way a careful person saves her future. Aaliyah moved through the next few days as if she were carrying a second heartbeat that no one could hear. On the outside, she remained composed, still making grocery lists, still folding laundry, still replying to Marcus with polite short sentences that gave him nothing to fight. Inside, she was building a timeline so clean it could slice. She ate in small bites. She slept in shallow waves. And every time Marcus strutted through the condo talking about after court, she felt the calm certainty of someone watching a bad bluff. She began calling the project what it was. An audit. Not an argument, not a breakup, not a messy emotional spiral. An audit. Audits did not care about charm. They cared about traces. They cared about sources. They cared about the difference between what someone said and what their records proved. The inheritance trail was only the first proof. Mortgage tracing came next. She pulled 3 years of transfers from her own savings account, each one dated and labeled with the same memo line she had typed automatically for years. For mortgage. For mortgage. For mortgage. She used to write it to be helpful, to keep her own books tidy. Now it reads like a string of tiny signatures on a contract Marcus never bothered to read. Then she opened his credit card statements and began matching charges to weekends, to business dinners, to client trips. Her eyes scanned like a machine, but her mind stayed human enough to understand what the machine could not. Intent. The spending wasn't just lavish. It was careless. It was the spending of someone who believed consequence was something that happened to other people. There were nights she had to pause, close the laptop, and sit with her hands flat on her knees, breathing until the nausea passed. Not because she missed him, but because she was seeing their life rewritten in receipts. A hotel booking in Miami during the week he told her his company had sent him to Cleveland. A first-class upgrade on an airline she had never flown with him. A restaurant in Atlanta on the very date he had sworn he was stuck in meetings until midnight. The charges were footprints in fresh cement, hardening into a map. The gambling took longer to confirm, not because it was hidden well, but because she needed to be absolutely certain. She searched for patterns, repeated merchant names, transfer descriptions, suspicious strings of small deposits followed by large withdrawals. When she found the first set of transactions to betting platforms, her stomach tightened. The numbers were not petty. 2,000, 5,000, 10,000. She whispered each amount as if saying it aloud could make it less real. By the time she finished tallying, the total loss made her stare at the ceiling in silence. Over $100,000. Not spent on repairs, not invested, not saved. Simply thrown into a digital furnace, fed by ego and adrenaline. She imagined Marcus tapping his phone, smiling at a win, then chasing the next. She imagined him coming home and criticizing her for buying the store-brand cereal. The imbalance wasn't just financial. It was moral. She saved every page, printed the summaries, and wrote notes in the margins as if she were preparing a report for a board that could fire him. In a way, she was. The deeper she went, the more she saw that Marcus's official income could not support the life he was funding for himself and Crystal. That question became its own column. Source of funds. If the spending was the smoke, the inflows were the fire. And fires left residue. Marcus kept a work laptop, but he used personal devices for quick email checks when he was home. He believed no one noticed. Aaliyah noticed everything now. One evening, while he showered before meeting a client, she opened the home tablet and navigated to the shared cloud storage. It took her less than a minute to find folders that didn't match the tidy story he told about his job. Spreadsheets with vague names. Scans of invoices. Draft contracts with inconsistent formatting. Screenshots of conversations that read like bargaining, not business. She did not feel excitement when she found them. She felt heavy understanding. Marcus wasn't only careless with their marriage. He was careless with legality. He was the kind of man who thought rules were for people without confidence. The file showed inflated numbers, duplicate billings, strange service fees, routed through third parties. There was a name that repeated, a childhood friend of his she remembered from old stories. The pattern clicked into place. Money in, money out, money returned in smaller, cleaner-looking pieces, disguised as gifts or repayments. Aaliyah copied everything into her own encrypted drive. She logged out. She cleared history. She restored the tablet to the exact state she found it in. When Marcus emerged, hair damp, cologne sharp, he smiled at her as if he were doing her a favor by still being present. "Don't wait up," he said, adjusting his cufflinks. "Big night." "Okay," she replied, and kept folding towels. Her voice did not shake. He left satisfied, believing he had the upper hand. Aaliyah waited until the sound of his car faded, then returned to her pantry office and added a new divider to the binder, irregular income. The next step required someone who knew the court the way she knew numbers. She could build the evidence. She could not gamble on how it would be presented. Marcus would have a loud attorney who relied on intimidation and assumptions. She needed someone who could make a judge see what the records meant without drowning in details. A friend from an old bookkeeping client list had gone through a brutal divorce the year before. Aaliyah called her on a Saturday morning and kept her tone casual, as if asking for a restaurant recommendation. The friend did not laugh. "If you want someone who plays nice, I can't help," the friend said. "But if you want someone who understands strategy, call Sterling. He looks like someone's grandpa. He talks slow. Then he stands up in court and turns people inside out with their own words." Aaliyah wrote the name down. Mr. Sterling. Midtown office. She called Monday and was told bluntly that he didn't take every case. There was a pause when she explained she had documentation and wanted a consult. The receptionist's tone shifted slightly. She offered an appointment for Thursday afternoon. The office was in an older building with carpet that had been cleaned too many times to ever look new. Inside, the air smelled like paper, leather, and faint tobacco. Shelves climbed the walls, stacked with thick books that looked heavy enough to stop a door from closing. Behind a desk sat a man with gray hair and reading glasses perched low on his nose. He wore a plain suit that did not try to impress anyone. He listened without interrupting as Aaliyah spoke. She told him the story without drama, the way she would describe a balance sheet that didn't reconcile. When she finished, she placed the binder on his desk. It landed with a solid thump. Sterling didn't reach for it immediately. He studied her face first, as if measuring whether her calm was real. Then he opened the binder. Page by page, his expression shifted from polite interest to sharpened focus. He made small notes with a fountain pen. The scratch of the nib sounded like a metronome. When he reached the inheritance tracing and the transfer memos, his eyebrows lifted. When he reached the spending tallies and the gambling totals, he let out a low, quiet whistle. "You're an accountant," he said. "Bookkeeper right now," Aaliyah corrected. "Auditing background." Sterling nodded as if that explained everything. "Most people walk in here with feelings," he said. "They want a judge to punish someone because their heart is broken. You walked in with a case file. This is the difference between a complaint and a conviction." He flipped to the section labeled irregular income and sat back, eyes narrowing. "You understand what this part could do," he said carefully. "Divorce court is one thing. These documents could become something else if they land in certain hands." Aaliyah met his gaze without flinching. "I don't want years of chaos," she said. "I want what is mine, and I want him to stop thinking he can erase me." Sterling's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "So you want maximum impact with minimum collateral," he said. "Yes." He tapped the binder with the back of his pen. "Then we don't show our full hand early," he said. "We let him posture. We let him lie. We let his lawyer build a story that collapses the moment the judge sees proof. Surprise doesn't replace law, but it helps law do its job." He explained what to file, what to request, how to certify records so the other side couldn't claim they were altered. He told her which sections were strongest and which required careful framing. The inheritance tracing would be the anchor. The monthly transfers would prove a contribution. The dissipation would justify compensation. The illegal income, if introduced, would pressure Marcus into settling or, at minimum, stop him from making threats. Aaliyah listened and took notes. She felt, for the first time since November, that the world had rules again and those rules could protect her if she used them correctly. Over the next month, she met Sterling twice more. Each time, he trained her the way a coach trained an athlete. Posture, expression, timing. He will try to bait you, he warned. He will call you ungrateful. He will bring that woman. He wants you to react, because reactions make people look unstable. Your job is to be stone. Aaliyah practiced in the mirror at night. She practiced saying nothing. She practiced breathing slowly. She practiced looking through Marcus as if he were a stranger on a bus. The night before the hearing, Marcus's performance in the kitchen had been his final rehearsal. Now the morning arrived, grey with drizzle, and Aaliyah dressed as if she were going to a meeting where she expected to win. Navy dress, hair pulled back, minimal makeup, clean lines. Not mourning. Not pleading. Prepared. At the courthouse, voices echoed in the corridors and the air smelled like old paper and vending machine coffee. Sterling stood near the courtroom doors with his hands folded, calm as if he belonged to the building. When he saw her, he nodded once. "Ready?" he asked. Aaliyah tightened her grip on the binder. "More than ready," she said. Across the hall, Marcus arrived like a man walking onto a stage. His suit was crisp. His smile was wide. On his arm, Crystal hovered, bright and smug, her lipstick too bold for the setting, her jewelry gleaming under fluorescent lights. Crystal's eyes landed on Aaliyah with the confidence of someone who thought she had already won. Marcus stepped closer, speaking loudly enough for strangers to hear. "Best day of my life," he said. "I'm taking everything from you." Aaliyah didn't answer. She let the words pass through her like air. Sterling shifted slightly beside her. "Let him talk," he murmured. "Every sentence is a gift." The clerk called their case. The door opened. The room waited. Inside the courtroom, the world narrowed to wood, paper, and procedure. The benches were hard and the carpet was worn, muted from years of anxious footsteps. Aaliyah sat beside Sterling and placed the binder in front of her with both hands, square to the edge of the table. She wanted everything in straight lines. The judge entered and took her seat with brisk efficiency. She verified names, glanced at the docket, and told both sides to proceed. Marcus's attorney rose first, a sleek man with a glossy smile and a voice trained to sound reasonable while saying unreasonable things. He paced a little as he spoke, turning toward the judge, then toward Marcus, as if collecting agreement like applause. He painted Marcus as the hard-working provider and Aaliyah as a spouse who had chosen not to pursue full employment. He claimed the condo existed because of Marcus's effort and said the mortgage had been paid exclusively by Marcus. He spoke of fairness while demanding an uneven split. He tried to dress his request as generosity, offering Aaliyah a small payout in exchange for surrender. Aaliyah watched the judge's pen move, small and steady. The judge's face did not soften or harden. She was collecting information, letting people reveal themselves. When the attorney finished, he sat with a satisfied nod, as if closing a sale. Marcus leaned back in his chair and smirked toward Aaliyah, certain she had been cornered. For a flicker of a second, Aaliyah felt the old sting of being underestimated. Then she reminded herself that truth did not require her to perform. The judge looked toward Sterling. "Counsel for the respondent," she said. "Do you acknowledge the claims? Any objection?" Sterling stood slowly, not with urgency, but with deliberate calm. He adjusted his glasses, opened the binder, and lifted the first document as if he were about to teach a lesson to a room that didn't know it needed one. His voice was firm without being loud. "Your Honor," he began, "we object to the narrative presented because it is not supported by the financial record. The court has been offered a story. We are prepared to offer verified documentation. Marcus's attorney made a small, dismissive sound. Sterling did not look at him. We also have a counterclaim, Sterling continued, regarding the classification of the property and the dissipation of marital assets. Aaliyah kept her face still, even as her pulse thumped against her ribs. She could feel Marcus's confidence tightening into something brittle. The judge nodded once. "Proceed," the judge said. Marcus's smirk twitched as Sterling spoke, the first crack in a mask he wore too often. Crystal wasn't inside the room, but her presence lingered in Marcus's posture, in the way he kept glancing at the door like applause might arrive. Aaliyah focused on Sterling's hands and the paper at any second. Sterling lifted the first exhibit. "Let us begin with the down payment," he said, and the room quieted. Sterling's voice did not rise when he spoke, but it filled the room anyway, steady and controlled, the way authority sounds when it doesn't need permission. He explained the inheritance slowly, laying each fact in place like a brick. Dates, amounts, sources. He did not accuse. He demonstrated. The judge leaned forward slightly as the first document reached her hands. She read without interruption, eyes moving line by line, pausing where the figures matched too cleanly to be coincidence. Marcus shifted in his chair. At first, it was only a subtle movement, the kind of discomfort a man shows when he realizes the temperature in the room has changed and no one warned him. Sterling continued. He traced the transfer from Aaliyah's account to Marcus's account, then the payment to the developer. He emphasized the memo line, the notarization, the timing. He let silence sit between explanations, allowing the information to settle. The judge nodded once, then again, a small motion that carried weight. Marcus's attorney stood abruptly, protesting that the money had passed through Marcus's account and therefore constituted joint funds. Sterling turned his head slowly, just enough to acknowledge the interruption. "Passing through an account does not alter the nature of funds," he said calmly, "especially when the origin, amount, and purpose are documented. Convenience does not equal contribution." The judge raised a hand, stopping further argument, and instructed Sterling to proceed. Marcus swallowed hard. The confidence that had buoyed him earlier drained into something brittle. He leaned forward now, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the papers as if staring could change the numbers printed there. Sterling moved on to the mortgage payments. He produced charts, color-coded and labeled with dates and account numbers. He showed the monthly transfers from Aaliyah's savings to Marcus's card, each one preceding the mortgage debit. The pattern was flawless, mechanical, undeniable. Aaliyah felt a quiet hum move through her chest. Not pride, not triumph, validation. Every night she had spent hunched over spreadsheets, every moment she had bitten back words to keep Marcus careless, had led her. The truth was standing on its own. The judge asked a single question. Were these transfers consistent for the entire period of the mortgage? "Yes, Your Honor," Sterling replied. 3 consecutive years. No missed months. No deviation in amount. The documentation reflects full consistency. Marcus's attorney fumbled through his own papers, flipping pages too fast, the rustle loud in the quiet courtroom. He muttered something under his breath and sat back down, defeated by arithmetic. Marcus's jaw tightened. His leg began to bounce beneath the table, a nervous habit Aaliyah recognized immediately. She remembered nights when he paced the living room during work calls, convinced pressure made him look important. Now pressure made him small. Sterling concluded the section with measured precision. Based on the documented origin of the down payment and the consistent funding of the mortgage from Ms. Vance's separate assets, we request that the property be classified as her sole property. The judge made a note and did not respond immediately. She moved on instead, gesturing for Sterling to continue. Marcus looked like he wanted to speak, to interrupt, to reclaim the floor, but no one invited him. "And now," Sterling said, "we address the use of marital funds." This was where the room shifted. Aaliyah felt it before he spoke another word. The air tightened, expectation thickened, and even Marcus's attorney straightened, sensing danger. Sterling presented the gambling transactions first. He did not moralize. He listed amounts and dates. He described frequency and totals. He showed how the withdrawals aligned with paydays and bonuses. He explained dissipation calmly, as if describing erosion instead of ruin. The judge's pen paused. She looked up, directly at Marcus, her gaze sharp and unblinking. "Do you dispute these transactions?" she asked. Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it again. His attorney leaned toward him, whispering urgently. Marcus finally shook his head once, barely perceptible. "No, Your Honor," his attorney said quickly. "We do not dispute that certain entertainment expenses occurred." "Entertainment," the judge repeated flatly. Sterling did not smile. He moved to the next section: travel, hotels, restaurants. He connected dates to credit card charges and flight itineraries. He produced tickets purchased for Crystal under Marcus's card. He produced hotel invoices listing 2 guests on nights Marcus claimed to be alone on business. The judge's expression hardened, the professional neutrality giving way to quiet disapproval. She tapped her pen once against the desk. Sterling saved the bracelet for last. He held up the receipt, then the printed photograph from social media. The contrast was stark, black and white documentation beside glossy color proof. The caption was visible. "The date is unmistakable. This purchase," Sterling said, "was made using marital funds during the marriage. The item was gifted to a third party. This constitutes dissipation." Marcus's face was drained of color. His confidence had not just cracked now. It had collapsed. Sweat beaded at his temples. He wiped his palms on his trousers, forgetting where he was, forgetting the audience. The judge addressed him directly. "Mr. Thorne," she said, "do you deny that you spent marital funds on gambling and gifts to a third party without your spouse's consent?" Marcus tried to stand. His legs failed him. He half rose, half slumped forward, gripping the edge of the table. I worked hard," he stammered. "I earned that money. I was entitled." "You were married," the judge interrupted. Her voice was calm, but final. "And marriage carries obligations." Marcus's attorney lowered his head. He knew the case was lost. Every argument he could make would only emphasize what the evidence already proved. Sterling delivered the final section with surgical restraint. He explained the irregular income without spectacle. He clarified that the court need not rule on criminal matters. He stated only that Marcus's claimed earnings were inconsistent with documented inflows and that these discrepancies undermined his credibility. The judge listened in silence. When Sterling finished, she leaned back slightly, folded her hands, and regarded Marcus as if seeing him clearly for the first time. The performance, the charm, the bravado, none of it mattered here. The recess was brief. When the judge returned, her ruling was precise, unemotional, and devastating. The condo was awarded to Aaliyah as her separate property. Marcus's claim was denied. The dissipation was acknowledged. Compensation was ordered. Marcus retained the car and its debt. Nothing more. Each point landed like a closing door. Marcus stood when the judge exited, but the movement seemed automatic, like a puppet pulled upright by strings. His face was blank, eyes unfocused. The room emptied around him as people filed out, murmuring, carrying their own burdens elsewhere. In the hallway, Crystal rushed toward him, impatience sharp in her voice. She demanded answers. Marcus spoke slowly, words stumbling out of him like broken glass. He told her about the condo, about the debt. Crystal's face transformed instantly. The affection vanished, replaced by calculation, then contempt. She stepped back from him as if he were contagious. "You lied," she said flatly. "You said you had everything under control." Marcus reached for her hand. She pulled away. "This isn't what I signed up for," she said. "I don't do broke." She turned and walked away, heels echoing down the corridor, leaving Marcus alone with the sound of his own breathing and the weight of what he had lost. A moment later, his phone rang. The call was short. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, merciless. Marcus listened, nodding, whispering denials that went unheard. When the call ended, he lowered the phone slowly, like a man setting down a weapon after surrender. He had been fired. The hallway blurred. The walls seemed closer. Marcus slid down until he was sitting on the floor, suit wrinkled, tie loose, staring at nothing. Aaliyah walked past him moments later, Sterling at her side. She did not stop at first. She did not look at him. She felt nothing pulling her backward. Marcus called her name, voice hoarse. She paused then, turned once, and met his eyes. There was no anger in her expression. No satisfaction. Only clarity. "You wanted everything," she said quietly. "This is the balance." She turned and left. Outside, the rain had stopped. Light broke through the clouds, bright and clean. Aaliyah breathed deeply, feeling something lift from her chest that she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. The past remained behind her, in a hallway that smelled of old paper and regret. Ahead was silence, space, and a future she would build on truth. Aaliyah did not look back once she stepped outside the courthouse. The doors closed behind her with a muted thud, sealing off the echo of Marcus's collapse and the residue of a life that no longer belonged to her. The air outside felt sharper, cleaner, as if the city itself had been waiting for her to walk free of that building. The drizzle had thinned to mist, and the pavement glistened faintly under the pale morning light. Sterling paused with her at the steps. He shook her hand, firm and respectful, the way professionals did when they acknowledged equal footing. He told her she had done exceptional work, that few people had the patience or discipline to build a case so thoroughly without letting emotion sabotage the structure. Aaliyah thanked him, meaning it. She felt no desire to celebrate loudly, no urge to announce victory. What she felt was completion. She walked to her car slowly, not because she was tired, but because she wanted to feel each step. The keys were cool in her palm. When she sat behind the wheel, she rested her hands there for a moment before starting the engine, breathing in the quiet. The silence did not feel empty. It felt earned. The drive back to the condo passed in a blur of traffic lights and wet asphalt. She noticed small details she had ignored for months. A woman laughing into her phone at a crosswalk, a man jogging with his hood up, the smell of coffee drifting from an open cafe door. Life had not stopped while she was buried in spreadsheets and court filings. It had simply waited for her attention again. When she unlocked the condo door, the space greeted her differently. The rooms were the same, but the weight inside them had shifted. No tension clung to the walls. No performance lingered in the corners. Marcus's presence was already fading, reduced to a few objects that would soon be boxed and removed. The condo was quiet in a way that felt intentional, not abandoned. She set her bag down and walked through each room once, slowly, like an inspector closing out a final report. The bedroom. The kitchen. The small balcony where Marcus used to take calls late at night, his back turned, voice lowered. Each space held memories, but they no longer demanded anything from her. In the kitchen, she filled the kettle and turned on the stove. The simple act of making tea felt grounding, ceremonial. She chose a flavor Marcus never liked, one he used to wrinkle his nose at and call bitter. She smiled faintly as the water heated. Bitterness, she had learned, depended on perspective. While the kettle warmed, her phone buzzed. Messages stacked up quickly once word traveled. A few were from mutual acquaintances who had sensed the shift and wanted details. She ignored those. One message was from her mother, brief and worried. Aaliyah replied with reassurance and a promise to call later. Another message came from her bank confirming a change in property designation. She read it twice, then set the phone face down. She poured the tea and carried the mug to the living room. Sitting on the couch Marcus had threatened to sell out of spite. She rested her feet on the floor and let the warmth spread through her hands. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to simply exist without calculating her next move. Across town, Marcus was unraveling. By the time he left the courthouse, the building felt hostile, as if it had rejected him. He stood on the steps, phone in his hand, staring at the screen long after the call with his former boss had ended. Fired. The word echoed in his head, hollow and unreal. He had always believed himself indispensable, the kind of man companies bent rules for. Now his badge was deactivated, his accounts locked, his access severed in minutes. He tried calling Crystal again, but the call went straight to voicemail. When he checked his messages, he saw that he had been blocked. The realization hit him harder than the court ruling. Crystal had not even bothered to pretend. The affection, the admiration, the indulgent smiles had vanished and the instant money stopped flowing. He had known this was possible, but he had believed himself immune. Marcus wandered to the parking lot and stood beside his car, staring at it like it belonged to someone else. The vehicle that once symbolized success now felt like an anchor. He slid into the driver's seat and closed the door. The interior suddenly cramped. The dashboard lights flickered on, bright and accusing. Payment reminders flashed in his mind, stacking one on top of another until he felt dizzy. He started the engine and drove without direction, the city blurring past him. He replayed the hearing in fragments, each moment sharper than the last. The judge's voice. Sterling's calm dismantling of his claims. Aaliyah's silence, colder than any insult. He had expected tears, begging, maybe anger. What he had not expected was to be erased from the equation entirely. At a red light, he slammed his palm against the steering wheel. "She set me up," he muttered, clinging to the narrative even as it crumbled. He told himself she had betrayed him, that she had gone too far, that she had humiliated him on purpose. The story almost held, until another thought intruded, unwanted and precise. She had not lied once. The truth was unbearable because it left him nowhere to hide. By evening, Aaliyah's condo glowed with soft light. She had ordered food from a small local place she liked, something simple and comforting. She ate at the table alone, savoring each bite, not rushing. Afterward, she washed the dishes and wiped the counter clean, the routine calming in its normalcy. She opened her laptop one last time, not to dig or trace, but to close files. She archived the folders, backed them up, and labeled them clearly. Not because she expected to need them again, but because she respected the work she had done. It was proof of her competence, her resilience, her refusal to be erased. Later, she called her mother. They spoke quietly, Aaliyah choosing her words carefully, sharing only what mattered. Her mother listened without interrupting, then told her she was proud. The words settled gently in Aaliyah's chest. That night, she slept deeply, dreamless, the kind of sleep that only comes when the mind has stopped running. Marcus did not sleep at all. He spent the night in his car, parked on a quiet street, staring through the windshield at nothing. The seat was uncomfortable, the air stale. Every sound startled him. He checked his phone repeatedly, as if messages might appear through sheer will. None did. He thought about calling friends, but shame stopped him. He thought about calling Aaliyah again, but something colder than pride stopped him then. He knew she would not answer. And even if she did, there was nothing left to say that could change the numbers. In the early hours of morning, he understood something he had avoided his entire adult life. He had built his sense of worth on external markers. Money, admiration, control. When those vanished, there was nothing underneath. No structure. No reserve. Just debt and consequences. The next days passed quietly for Aaliyah. She handled paperwork, scheduled the formal transfer of property records, and coordinated the removal of Marcus's remaining belongings. She boxed them herself, not out of obligation, but out of closure. Each item went into a box without ceremony. A watch. Shoes. Old files. Nothing sparked emotion. They were simply things. When the last box left the condo, she stood in the doorway and locked it behind the movers. The sound of the lock clicking into place felt final in the best way. She redecorated slowly, not to erase the past, but to reshape the space into something entirely hers. New curtains. Different art. Plants near the windows. The condo transformed, reflecting calm instead of compromise. Weeks later, she returned fully to her freelance work, then expanded it. Word spread quietly that she was meticulous, unshakable, discreet. Clients trusted her. Numbers behaved for her. She found satisfaction not in success alone, but in stability. Sometimes, late in the evening, she sat on the balcony with a cup of tea and watched the city lights come on. She thought about how close she had come to walking away with nothing, how silence had once been mistaken for weakness. She smiled at the memory, not bitterly, but knowingly. Marcus faded into the background of her life, a lesson rather than a wound. For him, the days blurred together in a haze of job applications, unanswered emails, and mounting notices. Investigations moved quietly but relentlessly. He learned how quickly doors closed when reputations cracked. He learned how heavy freedom felt when it arrived without money or dignity attached. One afternoon, he passed the condo building and slowed his car without meaning to. The windows reflected the sky, giving nothing back. He realized then that the place no longer held him, not even as a memory. It was no longer his story. Aaliyah's life moved forward without needing to look back. And for the first time, the balance held.